Assalamu alaikum. How valid is the Zionist claim to a so-called biblical right to the promised land, even though sovereignty of lands is not claimed in such a superficial way? Or how valid is it for one racist colonizer, in this case Britain, to hand over land to another foreign, usurping, apartheid, settler colonizer, in this case the Zionists, even though that the land doesn't belong to either of them? In fact, historically, how long did the Jewish people actually rule over Palestine or Jerusalem? What is their legacy? Who have been the longest, the most stable rulers of Jerusalem, bringing with them stability and bringing with them all its people together? Dare I say, who therefore has the greatest right to these lands if we were indeed to use this criteria? Let's go back. For roughly more than 3,500 years, we see that Jerusalem was part of Canaan, belonging to the Canaanites and then the Egyptians. The Canaanites were the first people in the region we know as Palestine, and not the Israelites. The Philistines, as they were known, they were the earliest known ancestors to the present-day Palestinians, and it is believed that they arrived in the region of Canaan well before the Israelites. As for its rulers, we know that the Jews didn't rule over Jerusalem until a lot later. If we go as early as 2500 BCE before Christ, the great prophets Ibrahim, Ishaq, Yaqub, Yusuf or Musa, peace be upon them all, or any of the other Israelites prophets, none of them were rulers. They either moved to Canaan, they lived under the various Canaanite kings of their time, then they moved out to Egypt where they lived for almost 430 years, or they lived in exile or in the wilderness. Eventually, the Jewish people returned to Canaan through the prophet Yusha bin Nun, Joshua, peace be upon him. However, they only start to rule over Jerusalem at the time of the prophet Dawood alayhi salam in the 10th century before Christ. It is worth noting this is the first time the Israelites actually ruled something. This was their longest period, even though it was a very short-lived one. The prophets Dawood, Sulaiman alayhi salam, father and son, their rule lasts approximately 73 to 80 years. Now, after the death of Sulaiman alayhi salam, we know his sons divide the kingdom of Israel into the north and south. However, they soon lose Jerusalem once again, and it changes hands between the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, etc. Now, it is estimated that in total, they ruled over Jerusalem for as little as 131 years during, that is, their golden period. Some argue slightly longer. And for a further 600 years, the Israelites do not rule over Jerusalem. And when they eventually do regain Jerusalem, they lose it to the Roman Empire. They would never rule over Jerusalem after that. So in total, the Jews rule over Jerusalem between a minimum 206 years to a maximum of 400 years, depending on what source you follow. As for the Christians, if you combine the pre-Constantine Romans, the Byzantines and the Crusader rule, it means the Christians ruled over Jerusalem between 4 and 5 centuries. What about the Muslims? How long did they rule? Muslims ruled Jerusalem from 637 AD all the way through to 1099. That is 463 years until the First Crusader War. After the 88 years of Crusader occupation, the Muslims regained Jerusalem and ruled it from 1187 to 1917 arguably, which is another 730 years. That is approximately 1,200 years of Islamic rule. That is 1,200 years of peaceful coexistence under the Islamic Khilafah rule, which witnessed Muslims, Jews and Christians not only living together but thriving together. No Jewish temples or Christian churches were destroyed during 1,200 years of Muslim rule, as there were under the Babylonians, the Christian Romans and the Christian Crusader rule. No Jewish people were exiled, persecuted, or massacred during the 1,200 years of Muslim rule as there were under the Babylonians, the Christian Romans, and the Christian Crusaders. Canaan, or Jerusalem, in its entire 5,000 plus years of history, has arguably never witnessed a more golden period of peace, coexistence, and progress as it did under the 1,200 years history of Islamic rule. It is history that tells us foreign invading powers, whether it was the Christian Crusaders in the 11th, 12th, or 13th centuries, or their successors, the Western colonial powers, in the 20th and the 21st centuries. They have only brought Jerusalem, they have only brought Palestine and its people anarchy, massacres, genocide, divide and rule, and exploitation. It was the Muslims' rule of nearly 12 centuries that gave Jerusalem its longest and golden period of stability, harmony, coexistence, and prosperity. So who has the best claim?